So many elements of children and youth ministry are fun, unpredictable, and even chaotic, but there's a serious side too. This means that we need to be aware of our legal responsibilities and to make sure that we all know how to best keep our young people as safe as possible when they're in our care. The purpose of this training is twofold. One is to let you know what the actual legislation says about child protection and child safety, and secondly, to inform you of the safe practice that we implement at Stairway when we work with those under the age of 16. The first part of this production is to let you know that there are important changes to the criminal law legislation that affects everybody working with children in any capacity. These changes affect every person who works with children and youth under the age of 16, and that includes you. It's our job to let you know and clearly understand what your legal obligations are regarding these changes, what we consider as safe practice, and what administrative procedures we as an organisation are putting into practice to apply these changes to what we do. So, what are the legal changes we're referring to? They mainly cover your responsibility in regards to disclosure, reporting and grooming. The first legal change to come out of the Royal Commission is applicable to every civilian, whether you volunteer or work with children or not. This is the failure to disclose. The law now states that any adult who forms a reasonable belief that a sexual offence has been committed against a child that is under the age of 16 has an obligation to report that information to the police. It goes on to explain that if any adult fails to disclose this information, it's now treated as a criminal offence. This means that if you don't inform the police of your concerns, you could face criminal charges and a jail sentence. So, what constitutes a reasonable belief that the offence has been committed? And remember, we are talking about an offence committed by an adult against a child under the age of 16. Reasonable belief is not evidence. Reasonable belief is a conclusion that any reasonable person would form looking at the same circumstance. Examples of situations that would help you form a reasonable belief are: a child tells you that they have been sexually abused. A child tells you that they know someone who has been sexually abused. Someone who knows a child tells you that that child has been sexually abused, or signs of sexual abuse lead you to believe that the child has been sexually abused. Those are just some of the examples of what a reasonable belief could look like. If you experience this, you need to report it directly to the police, and once again, be mindful that this applies to children under the age of 16. Reporting must take place within 48 hours of forming a reasonable belief, and you can do this by calling 000. Those who report this can do so anonymously. If the person you have formed a reasonable belief about is in our organisation, we ask that you report it to someone in senior leadership and/or Rosalind Owen straight away too. This is to safeguard any member of our church who might be at risk and also allow to provide pastoral care to anyone involved. Now, there are some exceptions for not reporting. If you fear the safety of your own life or the life of the child involved. And another exception to reporting is when the information has already been reported. For example, the person is already known to the DHS. It's really important to realise that even if you want to protect the victim, offender or organisation, that is not an excuse for not reporting an offence. It's abundantly clear that the law intends to protect the rights of the child and not the organisations. But as with all things, there is some wisdom around how we engage with these processes, and there are also a couple of exemptions that apply in situations not always applicable to the role of the volunteer. These mainly apply to journalists, doctors, legal practitioners, or police officers that are in the course of performing their duties, because there are legal implications around information that can be considered privileged. Another exemption is when the information is already in the public media, like the news, Facebook, newspapers, or any other public setting, in which case it's no longer your responsibility to disclose the information because it has already been publicly disclosed. The second change in the legislation concerns the matter of grooming a child. Grooming is when someone specifically prepares a child in certain behaviours with the express intention of ultimately creating an environment conducive to sexually abusing a child under the age of 16. This could include taking pictures of a child or physical contact that progressively leads to sexual contact. Grooming is the act of preparing a child with the intent of sexually abusing them, but the process also involves the act of manipulating people and situations to gain and maintain access to the victim or victims. Grooming is an insidious process that can be difficult to recognise or distinguish from seemingly innocuous situations. It has two main elements: building a trusting relationship with the child and his or her carers, and isolating the child in order to abuse them. The third area that the legislation has changed in includes the failure to protect, which involves the organisation, in our case, Stairway Church Whitehorse. The law now states that an organisation must do everything it possibly can to minimise the risk to the children under its care and supervision. The person in authority could be found guilty of a criminal offence if it was found that they knew of a risk to a child under the age of 16 but did not do anything to minimise that risk. So, it's really important to all of us that we show and prove that we are doing all we can as an organisation to protect the children in our care. These are some of the things we are now doing to minimise the risk of children being hurt in our care. We have electronic check-in of all children and volunteers. Our record keeping will be extended. We are conducting an even more thorough reference checking of all volunteers. Oh, and by the way, it's actually a criminal offence for you to start child-related work without applying for a Working with Children check. So please don't even go there. Our training in safe practices and legal obligations is now going to be compulsory for all volunteers. We will continue to review policies and procedures so that we are always doing everything we can to create a safe place for the children to thrive. The fact sheet from the Victorian Government is available on this link, and we strongly recommend that you read through them. Here at Stairway, we have outstanding facilities and a wonderfully diverse team of people who work with children under the age of 16. We want to continue to build on these strengths and to make sure that we are doing everything reasonably possible to continue keeping our children safe. To do this, we have put some vital processes in place. Leaders send children in same-sex pairs to the toilet. This applies to situations when the toilet is not in plain view. Secondly, there are some boundaries around physical touch. This requires discernment and good old-fashioned common sense. It often involves giving children choice. For example, would they like a high five or would they like a cuddle? Obviously, we don't have children sitting on our laps, and we make sure all our touches are safe and appropriate. Also, we have adopted safe practices as far as our staffing ratios are concerned. This means that you must ensure as an adult that you are never alone with a child. When it comes to photos, we strongly recommend that nobody keep on their electronic, mobile device or camera any photos of children. This doesn't mean that you can't take photos of children, but that if you do, you need to store them quickly onto a drive or onto the intranet where they can be accessed by the organisation you are volunteering with. When driving, and this also pertains to youth, always make sure there are 2 adults in the car and that you have the consent of the parents. When you have a conversation with a child, especially when you are having a private or personal conversation with them, Make sure that you are doing it in a public space, like in the foyer of the church, where there are other people around, or in a food court or any other public space. To protect yourself and the child, it's so important that you don't have those conversations in a private nook. It's also a good idea that you let your overseeing leader know that you plan to meet with the child and give them details of the place, date, and time. Electronic communication is another modern consideration. Keep in mind the grooming legislation. Make sure that you always communicate with the child in a format that can be reproduced. So think carefully about any social media that can be immediately deleted from record. If you have emails or Facebook communication that can be reproduced, it's much safer. If you are a part of a large organisation, like we are here at Stairway, we have a practice that says that no children under the age of 16 are allowed in storerooms at all. Only leaders and adults over the age of 16. We obviously want everyone to feel welcome. So if you have visitors joining your program, please make sure that you have pre-approval from the senior leader or staff member so that they can make sure that the appropriate screening has actually taken place. Please don't make an impromptu decision to bring along a friend to help you out. It's not fair on them or us. Make sure that in your regular contact with children, you don't give them gifts, because this can be perceived as grooming. If you do intend to give a gift, make sure it's a group gifting or that it's well known and well disclosed.
If you are planning to meet with a child, we have an app to make it easy for you to log when and where you met with them. Just click on forms, fill in the details and submit them to log the meeting into our records.
Never ask a child to keep a secret, and always let children know that you will be sharing any harmful information with your leadership so that everything stays transparent. Do you have any questions? I bet you do. So we've actually made it easy for you to ask them. On this app, you'll see a bunch of forms and documents that you can engage with. Some are just for you to read and get more understanding and information from, while others are electronic forms that you can fill in and send to us so we can answer your questions and hopefully help you to feel more empowered, valued and heard. Simply click on the bit that you want to take a closer look at and follow the prompts. It's easy. We are committed to equipping all our volunteers working with children under 16 with the ability to powerfully and positively impact their lives while continuing to meet our corporate and individual legislative responsibilities. Please, if you're unsure of anything, let us know.